Sonic R Retrospective. Sonic R the Retrospective. Maybe the R was Sonic R man, this is a fun racing game. Or maybe Sonic R, what a letdown. Reviews for Sonic R are mixed. To some, it's a cult classic. To others, it's a barren, empty land of wasted potential. What side of the fence do I sit on? Well, my compadres are about to find that out today. But before we get stuck into Sonic R, I just want to quickly talk about Sonic Origins. No reason. Sonic Origins released in 2022 and is a compilation of remakes of the classic Sonic games that retailed at $50. At the time of its release, I ostracized the game for its high price tag, rip-off digital deluxe edition, and missed potential. This collection simply wasn't what it could have been. Yet fast forward 3 years later, Jesus Christ, where's the time going? And it's now my de facto way of playing the classic Sonic games for those widescreen remakes and additional play modes. This is not just thanks to the Plus expansion. In the years since, I'd think a lot less about its original release price tag and much more about just being able to run improved versions of these games on my Nintendo Switch on the go, playing through the classic Sonic games as Amy Rose. Because the transaction was years ago now, and the game does sell a lot cheaper as well. Looking at it through the lens of today, looking at it not as a new release, but just a means of playing the classic Sonic games, it holds up a lot more favorably. It's one of those releases where the lens of today is far more flattering than the lens of the time of its release. Alright, enough about Sonic Origins. I guarantee there was absolutely no reason for that tangent. Sonic R released in November of 1997 on the Sega Saturn, and this marks a time where Sega were definitely falling behind in the console's race. After being trailblazers with the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive if you're based, Sega were very quick to release new hardware, including the Sega 32X in November of 1994, a Sega Mega Drive add-on that could effectively convert your Sega Genesis into a 32-bit console. But then splitting their own market in two at the exact same time they would release the Sega Saturn, which was a devoted 32-bit console, which would be kind of an evolution of what the Sega Mega Drive laid down, just with double the bits. So enhanced visuals, enhanced processing power. And while Sega would spend the back half of the 1990s releasing console after console, accessory after accessory, over in Japan at the very same time, Sony would break new ground in the console market with the Sony PlayStation. A console designed with 3D graphics in mind, so Sega had to very quickly find a way to force the Sega Saturn into running 3D titles.
We will not live in a two-dimensional world!
Which they actually did, thanks to the ingenuity of their developers. But it's safe to say the decision-making process surrounding the Sega Saturn really bottlenecked the potential of what those developers could actually achieve going forward, and they lost out on their chance to actually compete with Sony, and of course, Nintendo later on with the Nintendo 64. 64 bits! That's double the bits of the Sega Saturn, damn it! Maths matters! And in 1996, over a crisp year before the release of Sonic R, Mario would make the jump to 3D in Super Mario 64. Yes, contrary to popular belief, that game did not release in 1964. This 3D platforming game redefined what a video game could be, so naturally, all eyes were on other platforming mascots, including Sonic the Hedgehog. What does his jump to 3D look like? Well, mere months after the release of Super Mario 64, we got Sonic's 3D Blast, which is not even a 3D game, it's isometric, which was also developed primarily for the Sega Mega Drive. There was a little 3D world that players could explore in Sonic Jam, which would release on the Sega Saturn as a collection of classic Sonic games released in June of 1997, but we'd never get a truly, fully 3D Sonic experience until November of 1997 with Sonic R. And while Mario's jump to 3D Super Mario 64 was a continuation of the main series, that next mainline event status game, Sonic R was instead a racing spin-off. So you gotta think, for Sonic fans in 1997 eager to actually get a fully 3D Sonic game, making it a racing spin-off was already putting this game on bad footing. This was not and wasn't going to be the game that Sonic fans wanted it to be in 1997. 1997. And yes, looking at Sonic R as a new release within the context of the time that released on a full price tag, this game was very emblematic of Sega tripping over their feet, dropping new hardware, and falling behind in the video game's race. Mechanically, the game is not mega intuitive. There is no storyline in-game like, say, Super Mario 64 or plenty of other games at the time. The draw distance is confounding. And most of all, the game just has a supreme lack of content. You get 4 main tracks and then a bonus track if you get all of the Chaos Emeralds. And that's it for the tracks. That's how many tracks are in the game. There's no more after that. You had other modes that would inhabit these tracks, such as Time Attack and Tag Mode. There was a 2-player versus mode, so at least there's that. In terms of the gameplay, it's a foot racer that controls a bit more like a kart racer, in terms of how your character will accelerate and handle turns. And without anything in the way of a tutorial, that didn't really come across very well, which I think led to a lot of people simply playing the game wrong. Like the 2D Sonic games before it, you need to collect the Chaos Emeralds in order to unlock the true ending of the game. So you've got 7 emeralds scattered across the 4 tracks. There's no special stages here, they are just hidden away. They're off the beaten track, locked behind ring gates. So throughout the race, you'll need to collect 50 rings in order to open up that ring gate, collect the emerald, but you don't get to keep the emerald unless you win the race. Also scattered around the racetracks are Sonic tokens. Complete the race with these tokens and you'll be challenged to a rival race, with a brand new opponent joining you on the track. And if you beat the opponent, you unlock them to play as. However, you could theoretically just unlock Super Sonic first, and then eliminate all ifs, ands, or buts in beating the rivals. With Super Sonic unlocked, all challenge in this game is completely null and void. Given that this is a foot racer, there are some platforming elements here as well. Characters have their own stats and special abilities as well. Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles are all able to jump, spin dash, and roll, each with their own variation on the jump mechanic as well. Sonic can double jump, Tails can use his flight abilities, and Knuckles can glide. The rest of the characters are all machinery based in some form or fashion, so they lose the ability to jump, but can withstand water to varying degrees, unlike Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, because, you know, machinery and water famously go together really well. Metal Sonic can stand on water for a few seconds, but he will sink unless you jump, so you can kind of skip him across the water like a stone. Similar applies to Metal Knuckles, except he can withstand a bit more time on water than Metal Sonic can. Amy comes in a car because apparently women can't run, and this can also float on water as it transforms into a little hoverboat. Including this animation in here was oddly forward-thinking, while Egg Robo and Dr. Robotnik can both fire missiles at enemies. While Robotnik can hover above water indefinitely, in the case of Egg Robo, if you submerge him entirely, he can actually move pretty fast underwater, unlike the other characters. Having some characters that can handle different terrain differently can open up new possibilities for shortcuts. Also, real quick, I want to talk about the controls, because this was the first devoted 3D Sonic game. And Sonic's controls in 3D have been something of a challenge over the years, even though as far as mainline titles go, they absolutely knocked it out of the park with Sonic Adventure. But you know what? Sonic R is no sneeze either. So yeah, Sonic controls incredibly car-like, with the option to use one of the buttons as an accelerator as well. But I mean, you can use that button to maintain and control your speed while also using the stick to just handle the steering. But the steering does feel a little loose. Fortunately, Sonic R has a drift functionality, and this is something that I didn't quite understand the first time playing it. See, in the controls it lists left drift and right drift. Why would I need 2 drifts for left and right, the modern racer in me thought. And then upon using them, I was like, this isn't even drifting. Because in a conventional sense, this isn't really a drift, more a secondary turn button that you can stack on top of your existing turns to tighten them up. So your analog stick can work for just general steering, you know, kind of alignment stuff, while your drift buttons can be used for actual turning. And it feels incredibly responsive, at least on the PC anyway. I really felt properly in control of Sonic. There was never really a point where I felt like I needed to make a certain turn and couldn't. But also the gradual build-up of speed is really nice as well. But I also want to quickly talk about loop-de-loops, because they are in this game. The majority of them are scripted events, but there is a proper one in Radiant Emerald that you have to make your way around yourself. Getting loops right in 3D is something that they haven't actually managed to do yet in a mainline game. They're either scripted events, or have completely unavoidable dash panels to get you around it, or you could just fucking walk. Sonic R, believe it or not, got this right. you have to approach the loop with a certain degree of speed to make it around. That sounds like stating the goddamn obvious, but it's something they haven't managed to do since. And you could ask, well, what's just stopping you from jumping to the other side? And I'd say, well, that could be a speedrun strat, but also they've got walls up around the loop to prevent you from doing that. And it's angled in a way that you can't jump over to the other side of the loop. You have to be ready to take the loop yourself. So you mean to tell me the loop-de-loop, something that they've never quite gotten right in a mainline 3D Sonic game, is something they absolutely perfected on their first try in this here little racing spin-off? That's insane. With that being said, the characters aren't exactly well balanced in this game. Sonic is a good all-rounder with very few actual handicaps, and Dr. Eggman is actually quite fun to control as well, especially for the fact that he can kind of effortlessly glide on water. With Amy, you lose a lot of the speed, but you also lose a lot of that slipperiness that comes with other characters as well, with her kind of serving as like an easy, slow and steady wins the race mode for the game. Then you have Tails, who, despite his other advantages, he's incredibly slippery to control. Same goes for the robots generally as well. Now, this is all generally okay if you're just playing it on single-player Grand Prix mode, but if you're gonna play competitively with other people, the disadvantages with the other characters do start to stack up. However, once you've beaten the game with all of the Chaos Emeralds, if you don't choose Sonic to play as, he'll show up in these races as Super Sonic. And honestly, I really do like the challenge of racing against Super Sonic, but now there's not really much incentive to actually play as any other character. There are cool ideas for how these characters control here, and some tracks definitely complement these other characters better than others, but I think when you just have one character that is just so much better than all of the others, it does kind of kill that multiple choice nature, especially if you're playing competitively. Now, I've mentioned how much I love this game's presentation. Well, after each Grand Prix race, it offers you a chance to watch a replay of your performance. So you've got the beauty of the game and your performance all through cinematic camera angles. It's just a shame that slap bang in the middle of the screen is the instruction on how to stop the video and go back to the menu, with no way of turning this off. The additional modes such as tag mode and collect the balloons are also a lot of fun and showcase a different side to this level design because, yeah, these are not typical racetracks by any stretch. They don't even really look like racetracks. They're more like just little fun worlds that you can just run around. There are platforming elements, rings are everywhere, you've got springs. These are all different mechanics that you more see in a Sonic platformer than a racing game. And both of these modes encourage you to explore this environment without having to move in just the single direction as you would in a race. Balloon hunting was especially cool in Radical City because, like, you get balloons hidden away in places like what looks like this little construction site area here. I didn't even know that was a playable part of the map. I thought that was just decoration. It also gave me an excuse to play with the pinball table. It's not really the same as it is in the 2D games. Tag modes are especially funny as sometimes you can just see the AI just kind of hanging out. They're running from you, but they'll stop if they get far enough away, and then they might not realize you're coming after them, so it just looks like they're chatting. And that's the game. That's the whole thing. I don't blame Sonic fans in 1997 for feeling cheated. That's not a game, that's a demo disc. You'll probably get more content on your average demo disc than you would out of Sonic R, a full-priced at the time game. So I do not blame people who experienced this game at the time for harboring any ill will towards it. It is as bite-sized gets. But in 1997, at the time Sonic R released, I would have been a whole 1 year old, so I wouldn't be playing any Sega Saturn games with any kind of expectations at that age. I was still crapping myself, because babies are fucking gross and everyone needs to stop having them. So my first experience with Sonic R was playing it at Game Apologist's house in 2022 on his Sega Saturn and thinking, well, what am I doing here? And the man is the definition of ADD, so we didn't play it for long enough for me to really even get to grips with it anyway. But with Sonic Crossworlds' announcement, I thought, hey, we could do a retrospective on Sonic racing games, right? Probably a little bit late for me to go the whole whack on this, at least prior to the release of Sonic Racing Crossworlds. But I figured, hey, we could at least get Sonic R done. And so I headed to an abandonware website to download Sonic R on PC. This is apparently the 2004 edition by ValueSoft.
Hello, my name is Walter, and I am the creator of Channel Pup. It's very important that you know that I do not endorse downloading abandonware because its legality is dubious. Therefore, I cannot promote it. However, Channel Pup is a fictional entity, a character I totally made up and is by no means an extension of myself. I don't mean anything I say, and every mistake I've ever made is his and his alone, and has nothing to do with me. Alright, let's continue with the video now.
Now, you do have to kind of mod the game in order to get it to actually run on a modern system. Fortunately, the fans have you covered. There are mods available to do just that. There was also a 1998 version of Sonic R on PC as well, but as far as I understand, there's not actually any discernible difference in the overall experience of Sonic R, the 1998 edition PC port versus the 2004 edition PC port. It's all under the hood, behind the scenes stuff that the player's not going to actually be aware of. So I'm just going to refer to this as the PC version. Visually, it's mostly better than its Sega Saturn counterpart. For one, the draw distance is night and day. There are no visible problems with the draw distance this time around. So yes, you can see where you're going. There are a few trade-offs though, such as the water. That gorgeous Sega Saturn water rendering is nowhere to be found this time. The water now looks fine, but it's sure as hell not as nice as the Saturn version. However, the PC version does include a dynamic time of day and weather options, which can completely transform the overall vibe and atmosphere of these tracks and is a welcome addition, just one I wish I could switch off in its entirety. You can force clear weather in the options menu, but you can't force the time of day. Another thing with the Saturn version, I guess, is that, like, with the drastically lower draw distance, you could get to see some really beautiful skyboxes. So a still frame from the Saturn version is probably going to look nicer than a still frame from the PC version. The PC version also runs faster and feels a lot more responsive than its Saturn counterpart. And those are the major differences. Sonic R is still Sonic R, we've just got a better version of it. But now I want to kind of talk about my experience of playing Sonic R as a piece of abandonware from the late 90s. Because I've given you the whole, objectively, this game was emblematic of Sega falling behind shtick. I've acknowledged that the game is absolutely wafer thin in terms of content, but my experience with this game was so much more than that. And I'm telling you now, this doesn't come from a place of nostalgia, because I only properly played Sonic R for the first time this year. Sonic R makes an incredible case for classic Sonic aesthetics in 3D. And for the love of God, do not ever think about remaking this game. Unless... we'll talk about it later. Due to the limitations of the Sega Saturn when compared to the Sony PlayStation or the Nintendo 64, texture detail is significantly lower, the shading is much flatter, and the character models are noticeably very low poly. But am I the only one who actually really appreciates the art of taking these very quintessentially rounded character designs and putting them in the lowest poly art style possible? Sonic's quills are like 3 big tries each. These are some of the most ridiculously optimized models you will ever see, and yet they look fantastic. They're full of charm, all of the defining traits of these character designs are all present. By today's standards, this looks like a deliberate art style choice. There's an art to seeing designs translated into a completely minimalist approach. Partly why Funko Pops are so popular. I'd actually love it if Jakks Pacific would do a toy line of Sonic R action figures that are made to look as low poly as possible. I would collect every one of them. Or maybe if, like, First for Figures did, like, a Sonic R collection.
Speaking of which, I have these figgies from First for Figures. Great display items. The link to buy them, as well as my discount code, is in the description below. Hell yeah.
But then you add those quintessential Sega aesthetics. Vibrant blue skies with vibrant green grass. And the lower detail in the textures, and the less detail there is in the shading, the more kind of dreamlike the whole thing feels. Even more so on the Sega Saturn with its reflective water and gradually fading in level geometry. Sure, this was all bound by limitations at the time, some of which self-imposed by Sega's hastiness to get new hardware out. But the end result is an experience that I don't think any other Sonic game, or many other games for that matter, have really tapped into. And we're seeing other Sonic Zone aesthetics make their way into that low shading, low poly, sort of minimalist style, such as Radical City, which kind of takes your casino night kind of tropes and brings them into this style as well. The result is incredibly distinct from, say, Resort Island, but at the same time it still has that very dreamlike, surreal quality to it. Regal Ruin is your typical temple stage, a staple of Sonic games. Once again, incredibly distinctive. And the sunset skybox here is absolutely gorgeous with the purple sky and the orange clouds. I also absolutely adore these echidna statues. We know the echidnas are important in Sonic mythology, and it's great to see that carry over to even this racing spin-off here. And then the final main stage of the game is Reactive Factory, which is your typical Eggman base adapted into the Sonic R style, and once again, it translates beautifully. I feel like they landed on a low-poly, very economic style here that fits any Sonic aesthetic. The end result is just pure undiluted 90s Sega. Now pair that with the music, composed by Richard Jacques with vocals by TJ Davis. There's been some debate as to whether or not this soundtrack actually fits the game, especially because this is nothing like any other Sonic soundtrack. This isn't really like any soundtrack you'd hear in a mascot platformer. Comprised of entirely vocal-led Europop, these songs aren't just kitsch or camp. There's a sense of kind of romantic glamour to it. Lyrics often skew kind of romantic. So you've got an incredibly divisive soundtrack for an incredibly divisive game. Where do I sit? Firmly in the camp of this soundtrack absolutely fucks hard. Whatever I think of the guy personally, Richard Jacques is one of my favorite Sonic composers, and it's partly because of this soundtrack right here. It's nothing like anything in a Sonic game before or after it. And as much as I'm loving the soundtrack for Sonic Racing Crossworlds, I can't deny my heart is absolutely pining for more of Richard Jacques and TJ Davis. Does the music really fit Sonic? I'd say the compositions absolutely do. The vocals not so much. Do they fit these individual level themes? In quite a loose sense, yeah. Can you feel the sunshine for Resort Island is very upbeat and jolly. Definitely nailing down kind of a summer vibe for that one. Living in the City has a great kind of driving vibe to it, which is perfect for Radical City. Back in Time lyrically actually has a bit more to do with Regal Ruin than a lot of the other lyrics for the other zones. Although I think of these lyrics as just a really bad TripAdvisor review for Regal Ruin. TJ Davis did not have a good time there, clearly. And then Work It Out for Reactive Factory has a very kind of urgent feel to it. It's worth noting this is just an album of wall-to-wall Europop banger anthems. There isn't a single bad track here. But the whole thing climaxes once you've got all of the Chaos Emeralds and unlock Radiant Emerald. And I'm just now noticing that the game is called Sonic R and every track in it begins with the letter R. That's really silly. Someone was so proud of themselves for that. Now, I know Radiant Emerald, Rainbow Road, really similar kind of vibe, I get it. But I was just overwhelmed with a sense of magic upon discovering this track for the first time. A, it looks beautiful. B, is the music trying to get me to tear up or something? The chord progression here is just magical. I love Supersonic Racing, but I'm not playing this zone as Supersonic for the reason that Diamond in the Sky is just such a magical, dreamlike vibe that just epitomizes the entire experience. And then you abruptly roll credits because the game is finished. Well, that was a really enjoyable 20 minutes. Also, you're my number one. Absolutely fucks. Ah, oopsie, just realized we left an audio mod on. Can't be having that if we want the authentic experience. Ah. Okay, so what's even the point anymore? Send it back. As I said, some modding is kind of a must to even play Sonic R on a modern system. This 2004 port of a 1998 port of a 1997 game wasn't really made with Windows 11 in mind. And I can't exactly hold that against the game. But yes, the vanilla PC Sonic R experience is legitimately unplayable. So I guess 0 out of 10 by modern standards? The Sonic fanbase has not only kept Sonic R alive, it's even improved it as well. ADX Music by Cheat Freak restores all the music to the game. The original PC version would be booted up off of a disc, and so it would access its music files a little differently to how it does here, so it's just a matter of re-implementing that feature. There are also little visual improvement mods that bring the game a bit more in line with its Sega Saturn counterpart, such as Saturn-style coloring by Invisible Up. But perhaps one of the best mods for Sonic R on PC is the Sonic R Improvement mod by Shoin, which I didn't realize I had switched on as I was recording most of this footage. I'm really sorry. Fraud alert, I know. The Sonic R Improvement mod does little things like speeding up the menus and UI interface, which is, yeah, that's actually kind of justified. What's the hold-up, bozo? But it also improves things like character balancing, making for a much more accessible experience. Every character has refined turning controls now, and even Sonic, who was fine before, feels a little better here. I guess it does eliminate some of the challenge in the single-player modes, because I found myself winning pretty consistently with this. However, it definitely evens the playing field, even down to the fact that Super Sonic will no longer show up as an AI in the races. Super Sonic even starts every race with 50 rings, meaning that ring gates and rig-activated dash panels are completely trivialized. However, the rings do count down one by one, but again, this is kind of negligible. I don't actually know if anything happens if he runs out of rings, though. That's never really been an issue that's come up. And that alone is reason enough to try out one of the other characters. While the original was by no means bad, if a little at odds with the small character choice that it's offering to the player, this is definitely the stronger version. There is one feature that gets scuffed with this mod switched on, though, and that is the replay mode. I found that every time I watched this, I found the AI that was supposed to be representing me, mimicking my gameplay, was just crashing into walls. Is this game mocking me? This is absolutely hilarious, and I think I love this feature 10 times more for it. I guess I'm just so good at racing that the AI couldn't mimic what I did successfully, while it stumbles over its own feet and gaslights everybody involved. I think I love this feature purely for the comedy of it. I mean, if it's gonna go wrong, at least make it hilarious, right? Now, I mentioned earlier, they shouldn't remake Sonic R, but I'm about to eat those words. As there is actually a top-to-bottom remake of Sonic R available on Roblox by Rosie's Blossoming Group. This is called Sonic R Recharged. Although I think I'm supposed to call it Sonic Recharged, but then wouldn't it be Sonic R Recharged? How would you know it's Sonic R? The title's fine, I'm being a prick. And they've kept the art style, overall aesthetic, and the music all intact. There's even an additional track as well as an additional rival race in Radiant Emerald, where you can unlock Mighty and Ray. And for the little bit of additional content they've added to the game, they've also added in music from Metropolitan Street Racer, which was composed by Richard Jack with lyrics by TJ Davis. So it doesn't feel even slightly out of place, and this also helped me to discover another soundtrack that has music by this duo. That's such a gift. Honey the Cat is also unlockable. The game has online multiplayer, so you can play with your friends, including a playable lobby where you can just kind of get to grips with the controls, which are a little bit tweaked. They're a bit more in line with the Sonic R improvement mod, in that turning is just that bit more responsive. However, they've removed the accelerator button, and that might be due to Roblox constraints, I'm not sure, but I won't lie, I do miss it. But still, this is an incredible remake of the game. Maybe even a definitive version of it. If Sega were to remake Sonic R and release it, this is kinda how I'd want it to be. Although I'd still say go even further on the content. I don't hold it against fan developers for having a little less content, and for, even the fact that they have a bit more content than the original base game is impressive anyway. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. At the same time, though, I can't suddenly scream from the rooftops that Sonic R is a perfect game just because some fan projects and mods made something better out of it. Fan expansions and fan overhauls don't make a game better, they elevate the experience of playing it. And it's important to recognize that when looking back at these games. You can't reduce the scrutiny you put on an official product just because there's a fan community that have done wonders with it. That level of praise should go to the modders and fan devs. With that being said, though, this only drew more attention for me to what's so special about Sonic R. At the end of the day, the aesthetics, the music, the experience of playing the game vanilla is still really strong. The base game definitely has some balancing issues, especially after you've unlocked all of the Chaos Emeralds. But there was definitely something here. I highly recommend playing this game with the different quality of life mods, or playing the recharged version on Roblox over just playing the original if you just want to have a good time. But I'm certainly not going to rule out that you'd have a fun time anyway. It really just depends how you approach it. Is Sonic R a great racing game? No, not really. But in 2025 and beyond, I don't think that really matters anymore. Sonic R as a new full-price release, sure, it's like paying for a demo disc. And it was completely out of step with demand at the time and trends at the time. But we're not in that time anymore. This is free for you to download on the Abandonware website. And at this point, I could just appreciate Sonic R for what it is. Art. There's no experience quite like it, and I'm not going to play Sonic R for a mascot kart racer experience. The experience of Sonic R isn't high-octane thrills on the racetrack. It's much more akin to just taking a little stroll through a dreamscape, which makes a lot of sense given that while this was primarily developed by Traveler's Tales, it was also co-developed by Sonic Team, developers of the Knights series, which is all about dreams, and is arguably the Sega Saturn's flagship game. I adore Sonic R, and I regularly return to it for that dreamlike ethereal experience. I can completely understand being disappointed by this at the time, but it's well worth revisiting. Maybe that's what the R stands for. Revisit me later on. Okay, I'm done, go.
Thank you, patrons, especially the ones in the $10 and above tiers. We have Just Another Evil Robot Clone Seeking Revenge, Xanderwolf, Ghostly Phantom, Twilord, KB, Sad Goku, Dare Denny, Kale Bennett, my last name was a reference to the... couldn't even fit it in the whole thing, and Mr. SP, Cyrus the Skeptic, and Biotin. Thank you folks so much for your generosity. We got the $5 tier as well, who are Joseph Tribble, Pressplated Jason, Gideon Wells, Basic Content, Ben Raven, Reese Burns, Manalza, Goat Cannon, Litzy, Silver, Josh Strider, Grant Allen, Marv Animation, Cho Henshin, RT0, Carl X, SSS06, and Vera Wild. Thank you folks so much for your generosity, and to you, dear viewer, for watching this video, which is now over.